Hey everybody, it's Mitt. Welcome back to the channel. Okay, today we have a really special video in place. I've been waiting to do this video for a couple weeks now because I found an old interview of Alex Karp from 2009 when he was doing an interview with Charlie Rose. Now, if you don't know who Charlie Rose is, Charlie Rose is one of the most iconic, influential interviewers of all time. He has his own controversies, but he's done a lot of interviews. Now, I don't know how many people have seen this interview. If you haven't seen it, full 30-minute interview, I'm going to link in the description. You can definitely check it out. But I think it was really important for me as a Palantir shareholder, as someone who plans to hold the stock for the next 10 years, to really watch this interview. Especially because when you're investing in a company, you're essentially investing first and foremost, before the hype, before the revenue, before the numbers, before all that stuff, you're investing in people. Because people are what lead things to happen. It's not the numbers, it's the people that are actually able to be smart enough and visionary enough to get those numbers, to then get Wall Street to put more numbers into the company. So when you're investing into people, it's really important to understand who those people are. It is crucial, it is integral to know the management team of a company that you're investing in due diligence phase. And this is something I'm trying to make a theme on my channel for as long as I continue to put out content, which I plan to do for a very long time, is I want to do due diligence at the edge. So you know how Palantir says, like, we do AI at the edge? We don't just do AI. We do AI, artificial intelligence, at the edge. That means the most advanced forms of AI. I want to do DD, or due diligence, at the edge for whatever company I'm invested in. And right now, my two biggest positions are a biotech company that I've talked about before on the channel, and the amount of DD I've done on them spans 2 years, which is why I'm very comfortable waiting, for the next 5-6 years to let them play out, and Palantir, which I've done a lot of DD on. And I think to really form your due diligence, you need to understand the mindset and the vision of the people leading the company. In this case, it comes to Alex Karp. So this 30-minute video, I took 3 segments of it that I really enjoyed, that I wanted to analyze, that I wanted to talk about. It's going to be the early ideas for Palantir and how Palantir even got its name. I think that'll be an interesting clip to watch. Second, why they grew and put monetization second, and how they were able to focus on monetization later, but focus on aggregating scale and growing in the beginning. And then third is Alex's views on cybersecurity. I think these are 3 really good clips to let you understand more about the person you're investing in. And when you do DD at the edge, you build conviction at scale, so that even when it goes from 18 to 54, you won't sell, because a 300% gain isn't what you're looking for. You're looking for a really, really heavy gain, and you only get that over the long term when you stay convicted in a stock. And to build conviction, you have to believe in the people that you're investing in. So let's jump into my laptop. Let's talk about these 3 clips, and I'll see you on the other side. Okay, this first clip is how Palantir got started and the origin story behind it.
You had the idea for Palantir?
Yeah, well, post 9/11, I think the idea, again, it was Silicon Valley ought to be involved in fighting terrorism and protecting our civil liberties. Terrorism is asymmetric. Asymmetry presupposes software, because you're finding needles in haystacks. Actually using an approach that's not exactly like data mining. It was a critique on some of the data mining approaches that had been used at PayPal. And we thought that that approach would be very effective in this context, and would do 2 things. It would allow humans to find needles in haystacks, so make the data intelligible to you and me, which it's not. And by doing that, it would allow them to find bad people trying to destroy our society, and could be used also to protect civil liberties by making the data sets transparent, so that it was very clear what the government is doing and how they're doing it, which is a particular passion of our company.
So that's the first thing before we keep going. Really important to understand. 9/11 happened in 2001. Palantir was formed around 2003. So 9/11 was an absolute catastrophe. It was an absolute dismay and a collapse of cybersecurity and security protocols writ large. And there were a lot of patterns that could have stopped 9/11 from happening. And a lot of the motivations behind Palantir, which is a company that really truly does believe in the security and protection of Western values, is that if we were able to understand data at scale, able to aggregate data at scale without it being invasionary to individuals, right? Without violating your civil liberties, but by making that data transparent, then there's a better way that individuals can hold their governments accountable, and there's better ways that governments can protect their citizens from outside threats, which is an incredible motivation for a company. It's not I want people to be able to post dance videos, right? And I love TikTok. I think it's a fun app, but there's a fundamentally different motivation for this type of company, and that's what leads it to be the type of visionary company that it is.
This may be obvious, but why did you name it Palantir, after the seeing stones in the Lord of the Rings?
Yes. For those of you who had a social life in high school, you may not realize what Palantir is. For those of us who didn't have a social life, you immediately jumps out at you as the seeing stones in Lord of the Rings. And they allowed the West to communicate, or the forces of good to communicate and see into vast distances. And we thought it was a fitting name for a product that allows you to see into large databases, but doesn't allow you to see things you're not allowed to see, which is basically what the Seeing Stones
Which
do.
is one of the problems because of civil liberties and everything else, or
Well,
not?
yes. So the basic idea is that the West, or Western values.
So real quick, he is now about to describe the entire philosophical motivation for what Palantir is, and that is also going to describe why they should be able to aggregate data and understand data, but not see certain parts of data that ultimately harm consumers.
Will win if we in the West believe in what we're doing. There's no point in having a war on terrorism if civil liberties are being undermined to the extent that we aren't willing to fight that war. And this is particularly true in the cyber context. It turned out that the approach that was used at PayPal was essentially an anti-data mining approach. It was anti-data mining in the sense that data mining uses algorithms across large data sets. And what we do is we use what legal scholars call predicate-based search. So we would look at you, and then we would go out and say, oh, there's lots of different things in your life that may be indicative of someone involved in bad behavior. But it would also be very clear how the government looked at you. It wouldn't be a wide net cast into a sea of data that brings back all the innocent citizens that are touched by that net. It's a very precise operation, and each step in that operation is documented.
How much of your business is finding?
Okay, really, really important part there, and that sort of ends the first clip. The nature of Palantir has always been, how can we understand things better, and how can we protect the institutions that care about those things? So when he's saying protecting the West and Western values, he's saying, look, there's no way that the West can say we have a war on terror, we have a war on radicalism, we have a war against these forces that want to do harm to the individualistic values like freedom of religion, freedom of beliefs, all that type of stuff that are democratic Western values, right? That don't exist in other parts of the world. There's no reason to have that war if we are conducting that war on our own citizens. So if we, in this example, as the United States, say we don't like terrorists and the bad things that they do, but then we violate our own civil liberties, that leads to the hypocrisy of the United States. And that hypocrisy in and of itself undermines the legitimacy of Western values, because then other countries look at us and be like, you can't tell us what to do because you guys don't even respect your own citizens. So there needs to be technological foundations at the core of a country or an institution that is trying to protect people by making sure it doesn't undermine the values that it says it cares about, while trying to protect the people that it also says matter dearly, which are obviously the citizens of that country. So really, unique cultural value to understand if you're investing in Palantir, and that will guide the rest of the philosophy for how this company will grow. And it will also guide the way they interact with commercial clients, because commercial clients, they want their data protected. And in order for their data to be protected, they need to work with companies that philosophically, not just say it because they want to say it, right? Google and Amazon, they say they can protect your data, but they don't protect your data. And I think consumers, to some extent, don't really care that they don't protect their data. But there are other companies and other institutions like the CIA, NHS, and just a variety of different organizations that can't have their data breached. They can't have a Cambridge Analytica. And they need to be working with technology companies that get that. And when I mean get that, they mean actually get that, not just say that in order to sell them on more services. And this clip is about how Palantir ultimately grew.
Particularly in Silicon Valley. And I believe it's not because we're smarter. It's because we work better together, because we're more likely to be compelled by a big idea and put monetization second. And this is the secret to our company. And, even when we went to market, we didn't hire sales. We still don't have salespeople. We have no salespeople working for us at Palantir. We sell the product by exposing clients to it and saying, compare us to what you have.
Okay, obviously, this is in 2009. We're in 2021, 11 years later, almost 2022. So things have changed. Now they're hiring a ton of salespeople and a ton of marketing people, because they're realizing as a SaaS company, we can't really sell stuff unless people actually buy into it. And the product is not just going to sell itself because the product is phenomenal. So the key takeaway, though, to understand from that is that very few companies start with such a product-driven focus that they don't even want salespeople on the team. And I actually like that for the first, 10 years of Palantir, they didn't worry about sales, because they just recognized that if we build the world's most phenomenal product, it will sell itself. Now, in reality, does that always happen? No, which is why you have to hire salespeople. But the belief that they could create a product and then actually take action upon that belief and build out a product that is so substantial leads me to believe that hiring salespeople is necessary, because it's just like the nature of corporate America. But the fact that they focused on product first means that eventually the product will be able to sell itself as it integrates throughout many different commercial clients. It's like if they focused on sales with the product in the beginning, they wouldn't be who they are today. They wouldn't have a product that would be so transformational, so one-on-one, so monopolistic. But the fact that they did focus on product means that they really have a one-of-one product, and now they just got to get the world to know about it. But once the world gets to know about it, it's going to be very, very easy to scale and sell and break into different commercial sectors.
So what's the compelling business idea here?
The compelling business idea is if you want to make data, if you want to interact with data in a way that's intelligible to you, so the data that's around you, and you're the government, it's a very hard thing to do at scale. So let's just say you go to the market and you buy something. You talk on your cell phone. You send an SMS. You send it. Every little kind of, you write a report. All those are data. At massive scale, it's very hard for you to see that as a pattern. So what is the pattern of Charlie Rose? Is Charlie Rose interacting with people that are up to no good? And then it's very hard for me, the citizen of America, to look at the government and say, did they look at Charlie Rose because he was up to no good, or did they look at Charlie Rose because they didn't like his hair color? Oh, by the way, did they use Charlie Rose as a way to look at Charlie Rose's audience and find out who's in the audience? Well, if I'm looking at the government trying to figure that out, it's very hard to do. What's done currently is they hire a team of computer scientists who write algorithms that none of us understand.
Right.
And then they come back and say, oh, well, maybe. Do you believe the computer scientists they hire, or would you rather see it yourself? And that's what we offer. We offer a way to just plug on our platform, and you can be a leading expert in finding patterns in large data set. Whether those patterns are terrorists, they're cyber attackers, they're people, again, in financial malfeasance, or we, the people who want to look at what the government is doing in one form or another, either through Congress or through our attorneys, we can then see what the government is doing. This is very important. We also allow people to collaborate, which is an enormously important problem. When people look at what happened on 9/11, the conclusion was it happened because people weren't collaborating, and they focus on kind of
especially the CIA and the FBI.
Agencies did not effectively collaborate, right. And people focus on the policy and supposed inability to work together. But there's also a massive technical issue. How do you work in a massive data set and take out the two pieces of data that the FBI is allowed to see? It's very tough, and that's something we have a turnkey approach to that. You can put our product on top of your servers, and you can collaborate tomorrow.
All right, that part is really, really important to understand. So Charlie Rose asked a really good question back in 2009, which is like, what's the business opportunity, or how are you going to be able to sell this? And at the time, they weren't focused on commercial. They were focused on the government. A lot of the same similarities exist with commercial, but it's important to understand what they were trying to add in terms of a value proposition to a governmental client. And one of the key things he says there is that there are millions and millions of sets of data that exist as an organization evolves, and as individuals within the organization have to evolve with the organization as it grows. One of the key arguments here is, how do you have cross collaboration within departments of organizations, whether it's a government or a very large company, that allows the synchronous and symbiotic relationship of data from one part to the other part that is integrated, analyzed, synthesized, and then ultimately understood. In layman's terms, how does marketing talk to finance in a centralized software in which they can both talk about things that are necessary for the entire business to grow, but both not have to deal with complex confidential data that exists within marketing and within finance? Now, marketing and finance is a silly example, but when you talk about the CIA and FBI, there are certain things the FBI knows that the CIA can't know, and vice versa. And one of the reasons 9/11 happened is because they weren't able to cross-communicate those two organizations. And if they were able to cross-communicate, they would probably be able to find a large sets of patterns within aggregated amounts of data and be able to stop future attacks that were going to happen. And Alex is saying, look, there were policy issues that existed in the United States that caused that terrorist attack, but a lot of it was a technological challenge between how can the FBI get two pieces of data from the CIA and not anything else, and the CIA gets like two pieces of data from the FBI and not everything else. And on those two pieces of data, they can collaborate, communicate, and then advance the mission forward to protect the United States. That is a massive technological challenge. And the good thing about seeing this interview to me was like, I started to understand, okay, in 2009, how were they thinking about the product, right? How were they thinking about it in its origin? And at its core, when you talk about innovation, that is innovative. Like you're finding ways to use something that is the new oil, which is the immense amounts of data that organizations have, and you're finding ways to make sense of it to really solve large-scale problems. And it is a technical problem as much as it is a policy problem. And when you have technology at the foundation of different policies that can then work with that technology, then you have solutions at scale, and then you have use cases that are not just for the government, but that can be for every other sector that exists. exists in corporate America, which is why I get so excited about Palantir. Okay, last clip we're going to talk about is cybersecurity.
Moving to cyber warfare, what do you fear the most?
Well, I think that if we as a country understand what the danger is, and we as a country understand the kind of that it's possible to fight this without giving up our civil liberties, we'll win. If we underestimate the danger, or we perceive this as a war that will be costly to who we are, we'll lose. Democracies tend to win when the country gets behind it. We are kind of the greatest democracy in the world, and we tend to win wars where the people believe in what they're doing. Where the people think that there's a trade-off between civil liberties and fighting cyber terrorists, it's going to be very hard to win. Because, you know, you can think of cyber espionage as something we're going to live with forever. As long as we have computers that are turned on, there will be people that penetrate them. Every time we find a way to block them, they'll find a way in. The danger is real, and it's going to be with us the rest of our life. Now the question is...
Okay, so real quick, he's not fear-mongering there, right? And this is something I think about very deeply. I try to be very critical about it and analyze, like, is he just saying this for a business argument? Because a lot of people that work in these types of defense companies or contracts with the government, they always make these claims that, like, well, we should be scared of bad things that are going to happen and we have to protect against those bad things. But the more you think about it, the more you realize this is why anti-fraud and anti-risk mitigation departments exist in pretty much every company in corporate America, which is like, if we operate through computers, which the entire world operates through advanced computers, then there's always going to be people on the other side of what we are trying to do, which generally is good. And they're going to try to attack it, whether you're at a bank or whether you're at a government. There's always going to be this cyber espionage that exists, which means there's always going to be a market opportunity for organizations and technologies to be able to solve that problem or at least mitigate that problem. And that's where Palantir comes in.
If the danger is real and it's with us for the rest of our life, what can we as citizens do, we as Americans do, that allows us to experience the liberty we want and stop them? And I think unless that educational piece is really addressed directly, we will have a problem.
Educating the public about the threat,
both the threat and the way
necessity of taking certain. But approaches. Obviously, I'm biased, and I think Palantir's ability to tag data and show what the government has done is enormously important. But you have to explain if this is explained where there's a contradiction between our liberty and protecting ourselves, we're going to have a real problem. It's just the same way in any other war, where if we don't believe in what we're doing, we can't win. Where Americans believe in what we're doing, we tend to do very well. But then are you arguing if they believe in what you're doing, they're willing to give up civil liberties?
Well,
is that part of the argument you're making?
No, well, I believe one of the reasons why I actually talk in public is that there are approaches like ours which allow the people to make sure the government is actually doing what it claims to do. So if you understand what the government is doing to protect, and you understand what the limits are, and you know those limits and they can be enforced, that's one thing. If it's data mining where they're casting a massive net under the aegis of protecting us, well, that's not fine. So let me give you a concrete example. Data destruction, something that is not talked about enough. So you're running a large multinational company, and the government knocks on your door and says, your data is about to be destroyed. We know it because we were down the stairs. We have also classified files. We understand what's going on. We need to make a copy now of your data to prevent it from being destroyed, because we know how to secure that data. Well, you might be in favor of that, except for you want to make sure they're not going to use that data against you. Like, what's the guarantee that they use that data doesn't get migrated into a case that the government brings against you? What if the government already has a case against you?
Answer your own questions.
Well, our approach is when the government takes the data, it's tagged in a way that shows the source. So it can't be migrated from the data they've taken from you to a case they have pending. And this is enormous.
So if they take the data, you make sure they tag it.
If you use our platform, we can take that data and ingest it. It's tagged. If it's migrated into a case that they may have running against you, your defense attorneys will see that. And you'll say, okay, well, this data came from data I gave you. This is enormously important. You're not going to have buy-in to help the government protect you unless you know that your liberty is going to be protected.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that last part, because that last part I thought was super good. Basically, he's talking about in 2009, right? In order for data to be protected in a meaningful way, especially when it comes to civil liberties not being violated, which is our own rights as citizens that are guaranteed by the government, right? These unalienable rights, then there needs to be technology solutions that are able to create these types of transactions. So in this example, it's like, okay, if the government says they need your data for some company because they need to protect protect the national interest, and you're like, okay, I trust the government, they should be able to do this. How do you know that a government that has done some untrustworthy things, like the United States government, won't use that data against you? And there have to be specific technological approaches that can be implemented, i.e. Palantir's technology, that shows the source code of how that data is transferred, how that data is used, how that data is manipulated, how that data is aggregated. Basically attach any verb to data. Palantir is able to better give you insights and understandings for how that data operates, which doesn't trade off, which was Charlie Rose's question, with civil liberties, right? Because Charlie Rose, before that, he asked them, like, so should we use your technology to protect the West, but give up some of our civil liberties? This sort of classic trade-off argument of protecting the collective but sacrificing some of the individual. And his argument is like, no, we shouldn't do that. And is that always going to be a perfect utopia in which that doesn't happen? Probably not. But in some cases, if there is technology at scale that's adapted and integrated throughout the fabric of society, in this case, the United States federal government, then there are checks and balances for the government being able to violate civil liberties and protect the Commonwealth, because there's technology that doesn't allow that to happen. So really, really interesting stuff. I enjoyed these 3 clips. I hope you guys enjoyed these 3 clips as well. Full interview down in the description. Let me know what you guys thought of Alex Karp and his hair that was a little bit less wild back in 2009. I really enjoyed it, and I hope it gave you some good insights as a Palantir shareholder. Thank you guys for watching. My name is Mitt. Look forward to reading the comments. I'll see you in the next one.